know, all guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 are brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. We're talking European roots with a Caribbean soul. Start your evening. It's the middle of the week. Let's get after it. A refreshing German lager in a can. Pick up a six-pack at your local Sedano's, Presidente, Winn-Dixie. Remember to always drink responsibly. And, of course, Johnny Cuba's mantra, I practically live my life by it. Stay tranquilo. Joining us here is our pal Mike Golic Jr. He's got the Gojo podcast available wherever you get your podcasts right now. Been a while since we've spoken. I remember, actually, I think it was, man, it's hard not to remember the date because it was 3 years ago. It was the week we were all dealing with the Kobe Bryant, anniversary. It was that Super Bowl week in Radio Row here in Miami. You were still working at the mothership. I was still doing the show with Amber Wilson on Odyssey. That was the first time we met that week. Hard to believe that was so long ago. Are you doing the Gojo show from Radio Row next week? Are you doing any kind of festivities?
Yeah, we'll be out there all week long. Myself and the rest of the DraftKings crew will be set up with the VSiN crew out at Radio Row. So we'll be throwing bows out there all week. It's especially, you're right, with, in the middle, everything that happened with COVID and how that kind of changed it up. It's going to be weirdly nostalgic being back in a fully throated Radio Row, getting ready to go and, getting ready for an incredible Super Bowl matchup too. We're super lucky in that regard. So we'll be out there though, ready to go. Definitely.
It's probably weird now. Like, are there going to be a bunch of digital, a bunch of podcasts set up now on Radio Row? Is that what it looks like now?
I'm sure it's going to be a mix of all that now, man. It's an interesting time where audio has a lot of different forms. And so I'm sure there'll be digital stuff. I know I'm jumping on a couple of other live podcasts that are getting pumped out. It's kind of where we're at this point. We're just a bunch of people with microphones covered in sweat, eating trash for an entire week inside of an event hall. That's what it boils down to. We are all equal in the eyes of God and the food services folks that have to serve the absolute gluttons that are a part of audio.
Hey, so we find out this morning, Brady releases the video. What do you think the timing there was about? Because I immediately think two things. Number one, I commend him for not doing it next week. Don't take away the shine from the Super Bowl. This is the week to do it. All of us need something juicy to talk about to fill time this week. So that's a good job out of him. Also, doing it this week, he's going to be on Fox's Super Bowl coverage, right?
I'd imagine, yeah, in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know if that was a part of it in particular. I joked that he saw Greg Olsen cooking in that Fox One booth and thought, man, I better get over here and start working before I get fully Wally pipped, even though the money would never allow it. But I mean, the timing indicates this is a man that knows content, surely, because doing it the Wednesday, we had all the coaching news yesterday. It's the Wednesday in the middle of Pro Bowl week. You will get your just due, and it'll come from others. He did a short and sweet video. He understood and even joked, you only get one long retirement letter, and I cashed that chip in last year. And so I think this to me indicates that he actually wants to be done, and he got to do it on his own terms. We didn't have any insider leak it, so we're not going to have him rage enter back into the game and try and do this. His life changed a lot in this last year. I know people want to equate it to just the one of one, he came back and got divorced, but to me, that's indicative of, all right, you know what? There's some things that probably as a family man, as a father, and as a, co-parent that I'm sure he wants to do more and more of now. He's a 45-year-old adult. There's a lot of things that he's got going on in his life. And I think now he's finally at the point after how exhausting last year looked. It never looked like it was a good time last year. And I know we all thought, myself included, maybe that would prod him to want to go out on his own terms, but it also could just show you, man, I don't know if I can put all the things that I put into this game for the whole 365 in to get potentially that kind of result again.
Have you ever had any regrets as a sports fan? Because I almost repeated this regret with Brady, because one of my regrets as a sports fan was I hated Michael Jordan growing up. All right. He won his championships all throughout my teenage years. He used to kill the Heat in the playoffs. He used to always beat the Heat in the regular season. So I hated Michael Jordan. And then when Michael Jordan retired, I was in college. So I was a little bit more mature. And I'm like, man, I really regret the way that I looked at him when he played, because I don't think I appreciated as much as I should have, because I spent all the time hating him. And I almost did that with Brady. Now, it's rightfully so with Brady because it's the Patriots, it's Dolphins, it's in the division. But like, I'm glad that Brady got to spend the last few years in Tampa because I really liked him the last few years.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's actually an interesting lens to think about viewing Aaron Rodgers through right now. Because talk about a guy who's one of the last remnants of the old guard of NFL quarterbacks, as we've seen Drew Brees and then Ben Roethlisberger and now Tom Brady and a number of guys that were foundational in my football life as a young person growing into a young adult, the guys that I watched playing when I was in college. I think for all of the reasons off the field and some of the complications with him as a person that Aaron Rodgers has had that aggravate us at times and have made people look differently, that man was the original Patrick Mahomes. And I think remembering as we go, whether it's with the Packers, whether it's with another team, whether he decides to hang it up, if we do get more Aaron Rodgers, kind of appreciating what a unique football space he occupied, being that foil to Brady, where he was the one we always said, best versus most accomplished. He was so much more talented than Tom, and the things that he did outside of the body of the play were so spectacular. It gave us the opportunity to get to the Mahomeses and the Josh Allens of the world. So I think that's a smart way to remember to inform how we look at a lot of these guys, because it doesn't last forever. We're getting that realization now with so many great players.
Are we going to miss Brady? Because I think the NFL it's a different kind of machine. Like when LeBron eventually retires, we're going to miss LeBron. All right. But I don't know that we're going to miss Brady. Like, do you miss watching Peyton Manning? Because I mean, not really. Just they keep turning out these great quarterbacks.
Yeah. Oh, listen, the NFL got bailed out. And I think this is a larger football conversation of you let more people into the party at quarterback. Like before, when those guys were coming up, we still had a lot of, there was a lot of stigmas inside the sport about black quarterbacks playing the position and the idea of dual threat almost seeming like a 4-letter word. And the thought process, even going back to when RG3 came into the league, that, oh, you can't do this in this league because the athletes and the defenses are too good. And as it happened in high school and in college, where more of these spread offenses put their best player, their best athlete at quarterback, these guys that were capable of doing so many high-level things from the neck up, but can also buy you time with their feet. The league has spent so much time and effort, rules and money-wise, taking care of the quarterback, that now having guys there that can do incredibly exciting things, the things that we used to see from running backs. Back in the day, that used to be the position that had the creativity, that was dynamic, that made the plays that sort of live in our head. Now you got quarterbacks capable of doing that. And so if you are in the NFL, yes, you're an incredibly great and healthy place to be able to absorb this, because you've got Patrick Mahomes and you've got Joe Burrow and you've got Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and on down the list of these captivating guys that seem like they're here to stay and have already accomplished so much as young players.
As a former player, and of course now a fan, how did you experience Joseph Osai at the end of the Bengals Chiefs game? Because I'm watching it, I got for gambling purposes, I got a side in the game, but I'm watching it as a neutral fan. And as a neutral fan, I felt really bad for him, but if I'm a Bengals fan, I'm out of my mind.
Yeah, so I think as a teammate, the way I always approach those spots is I was happy to see guys like BJ Hill stick up.
That's a good friend. I like that guy now. That's a good friend, that BJ Hill.
Yeah, and you have to, no matter what you think, because I said with Joseph Osai, it's fascinating because I think it always differs based on what you know about that guy in your locker room, right? I said, if you've got a teammate that is the guy that is uber talented, but he's routinely the guy in the offseason that's missing stuff, that's not a foot on the line guy, that ignores the details and is sloppy with his work, but he's super talented, so you want him out there, and he's the one that makes the mistake, you put on a brave face for the public because it's us versus everybody else. It's family business, and we're not going to let the outside world, the fans who are already going to say horrible things, go and affect him anymore. We're going to have his back publicly, but privately, you're going to be like, damn, this is why we've been trying to tell you. Yeah. But if it's a guy who does all the right things, and by all accounts, Joseph Osai seems like one of those guys, was having a great game in this one. If you've got a guy that's been doing all the right things and bleeding with you every day, and he just makes one mistake in a game that is fast and violent and where those things happen, you understand, and I know it's a cliche line that no one play wins or loses a game. every one of those Bengals players is going to go back and watch that film and find a couple plays in the game they don't like about themselves, a couple plays where they made mistakes. And just because theirs wasn't the one right before the end of the game, they're not going to get taken to task in the same way. But as a player, we all have a chance to swing the outcome positive or negative, and his was just bad timing. So I felt for the dude. I was glad to see people lift him up and rally around him, because that's what you've got to do for a guy that's going to deal with so much heat and so much negativity from the outside world. You've got to be their rock in that moment, because you're the one who knows what they're really about. And you've got to remind them of that in that moment, because he was drowning. You saw he was drowning in all of that. And you've got to be that life preserver for your guy in that moment.
So right now, Mike, the Dolphin fan, the last few days, it's Vic Fangio watch. Like, the Dolphin fan is crazy about Vic Fangio not having been announced as the defensive coordinator yet. That maybe he's going to renege, I need you to explain to me how important it is for the Dolphins to sign Vic Fangio. I understand he's a great defensive coordinator, but I find myself, I can't get wrapped up in it. It's like, if he signs, that's cool, but otherwise they'll find another guy to run their defense. I don't know. Am I taking it too lightly?
No, I mean, that's probably the healthiest way to look at it. Now, it is important, and Vic's a great defensive mind. There's no denying that man can come in and structurally, leadership-wise, may not have been right to be a head coach, but certainly knows how to coordinate the hell out of the defense. And if you're a Dolphins fan looking and knowing, hey, all right, our head coach, he's got the offense wrapped up. Like, we know the quarterback situation, that's going to be the thing that requires the most care going forward. But we got a coach that's a legitimate difference maker on that side of the ball. And we've got players that are legitimate difference makers, especially in that front seven on the defensive side of the ball, on that D line. And so making sure you've got an adult in the room who's able to go and get the best out of them. I can understand why that's important, but I don't know. I have a hard time. And maybe this is just the old player. Like, when people transfer, when people took different jobs, I'm like, all right, we'll wait for the person who wants to be here and we'll go forward with them, has always kind of been my attitude.
Give me some thoughts on Mike McDaniel here real quick, because Mike McDaniel obviously had the 5-game losing streak. I thought he had a really rough playoff game, obviously. But why does a coach need to essentially be a finished product in his first year? Quarterbacks, we give the leeway. Hey, it's going to take a year or two. They're going to be a lot better by year 3. We saw it with Tua than he was the first couple years. Why don't coaches get afforded that leeway? Like, I like Mike McDaniel, but I also think that, hey, he made some mistakes this year, and I would expect a rookie head coach to grow and be a lot better by year 2 and 3. I feel like coaches don't get that leeway.
No one gets leeway anymore. Like, we don't allow for that as a society. We don't allow anybody to you've got to get in and show us immediate returns right now, or you're bad and you're a bust and you're a waste. That's how this goes. Now, the notion that there would be any negative sentiment about Mike McDaniel overall, like, yeah, you can have criticism about individual decisions. What that guy did this year, I've said Kyle Shanahan deserves a lot of credit for going and getting to the level that they did with their third quarterback, but they had definitive answers at who was available at that position, right? At the beginning of the season, Trey Lance gets hurt. He is done. You have Jimmy Garoppolo from there on. At that point, you have Jimmy Garoppolo and he gets hurt. He is done. And so now it's Brock Purdy time. It was clean breaks each and every time. For Miami, as the quarterbacks rotated all year, it was Tua dealing with a concussion, Teddy dealing with different injuries, kind of having game plans ready for multiple guys, especially down the stretch of the season going towards the playoff game. What he maxed out with that offense. And yeah, I know the receivers there certainly helped, but you would have decided schematic advantage. Not every coach can be everything at all times. We see this with clock management with Andy Reid. We see this with conservative fourth down calls with Kyle Shanahan. Every coach is going to have a couple of things that they don't do well. Sometimes that's consistently. Sometimes it pops up in moments. You want someone who is very good at a few things. And Mike McDaniel has already shown, leadership-wise, being able to get the most out of Tua and help revive that player's career and get it going on the right track. That's something that coaching-wise we devalue all the time. Someone who can actually go in and connect with these guys and get the most out of them, and then bringing over an offense that's part of a tree that's sweeping the NFL, but adding his own wrinkles to it based on the personnel that they have had. I thought Mike McDaniel was a guy that, again, Brian Daboll ran away with Coach of the Year because of what he did with how little he had in New York with the Giants. Kyle certainly deserves some praise as well in that. What we saw with Doug Peterson and the Jags, but there was a world where I thought Mike McDaniel could have got some votes based on what he was able to do with this Dolphins team.
I think Mike McDaniel's job going into the year was to find out if the Dolphins have a quarterback. He accomplished that and made the playoffs when that quarterback missed 5 games. I thought he did I thought he gets flying colors passing grades this year. Lastly, I want to ask you about the Super Bowl, but I really want to ask you about the Kelsey brothers. Like what's going on in their in the family's house this week? Are Travis and Jason, do they talk to each other this week? Like, what do you imagine goes on there?
Oh yeah, I'm with how close those guys are. I mean, they do a podcast. They liked that relationship so much they decided they wanted to give it to other people. So I'd imagine it's going to be a really fun week in the house, mostly because remember, they've both already got rings. Now they're hyper competitors. They're both future Hall of Famers. They're both part of teams that are on the cusp. Like they know, both of them. You don't get that many opportunities to do this, even for these guys. Jason had the 5-year gap in between the last championship and this one. He had the lead up to it before. They appreciate this moment, but there's also that. And they seem really close. Like, I'm sure that's a family with a group chat that has traded barbs already this week, where mom's probably had to lay down the law because I'm sure Donna's got to be the one to make sure, because you got to keep mom happy. That's the rule. So for this next week, it will be their job to keep mom happy. But it to me, I think is a cool celebration moment for them. These guys are already made men in the NFL. They've become 2 of the best faces, and they get to accomplish something so unique. Like, I got to play college football with my brother. We played on the same team. So we were never playing against each other. We played on the same team in high school, never had to play against each other. And for them, at least, they also don't have to line up against each other. I remember listening to Chris Long talk about when him and Kyle used to square off when Kyle was playing for the Bears and Chris was with the Eagles at the time. And it wasn't fun for them. Like, having to go up against your brother potentially and one of you beat the other, like, you don't really want that. As much as you guys talk bleep to each other out of fun, like, there's so much love in these relationships. I'm glad these 2 guys don't actually get to square off. So it'll be an awesome celebration for them and their families. I'm sure Donna and Ed, who have become characters in the game now too, are going to have a blast with it. And I'm really excited for them.
I know you're way into pop culture on the Gojo show. What are we watching these days? Have you finished Netflix? Are you watching something?
Watching The Last of Us on HBO right now.
Oh, everyone loves that. I got to watch that, right?
It's really good. So I didn't play the video game. It's an adaptation from a really, really I had a friend of mine say the original Last of Us video game is one of the 10 best stories he's ever heard, read, seen. And they've adapted it to screen right now. And through 3 episodes, it's already produced one episode that I would call one of the best, if not the best, episodes of television I've seen in the last 5 years. It was incredible. There's a Nick Offerman appearance in there who is sensational. So Murray Bartlett, who just came off season 1 of White Lotus as Armand in that one, is also in the episode. But yeah, that one passes with flying colors. It had the largest episode 1 to episode 2 jump in viewership on HBO Sunday nights in the history of HBO. Wow. So get on the wagon right now, because this train is going places.
Okay, so it's not streaming. It's a weekly episodic show on HBO.
It's a weekly episodic show. They do factor in, it's on HBO Max. You can watch it after, but we talk all the time. Like, we thought appointment viewing died when when Game of Thrones.
I miss appointment viewing. I like that it's an event where we're all watching at the same time. And we got that again with Game of Thrones House of the Dragon.
We did. And this even seems to have taken it a step further. And it's always good because you bring the video game audience that wants to see how you have adapted. And so far, I've done the nerdy thing where I go and watch on YouTube and they do the side-by-side. It's been pretty, it's been pretty dutiful to the game as far as how they've gone, even frame by frame in some of the shots. But awesome. It's, post-apocalyptic. It's I won't spoil too much, zombie-ish, zombie-esque thriller there. But a genre that I really like, and so far, again, it is been incredible. So highly, highly recommended if you've got the time on Sunday nights.
I'm gonna get to that. I'm a little bit behind, but I'm watching Alice in Borderland right now. Have you seen Alice in Borderland?
I have not. No, I've been doing this, and I've been doing the White Lotus seasons right now. So I haven't gotten to Alice in Borderland yet. Worth the time?
Yeah, I mean it's essentially like Squid Game. I was on Squid Game right at the start. Now when it became cool for everybody to watch Squid Game, I watched it immediately. I'm like, and then the show blew up. This was recommended to me. It's very similar to Squid Game. So Alice in Borderland, I dig it if you like that kind of stuff.
All right, there we go. Listen, always looking for more. Like, so my like weird, everyone's I think got like one weird personality trait or like one sort of like hipster niche thing that they go into. I really like anime. And so
Really?
I'm always, I was a kid that grew up with Dragon Ball Z being really popular, which is funny because you look at a lot of young NFL players and young NBA players, a lot of them grew up sort of consuming that same stuff. You see a lot of that work its way into pop culture references with young professional athletes right now. So I grew up on the Dragon Ball Z stuff. I've worked my way through a bunch of other stuff. It is very daunting because we talk about some of these shows where there's robust catalogs. I opened up a show the other day called Bleach, and I wanted to watch the new series of it. And I was like, oh, I probably need to go back and check out the original. 26 seasons and 350 episodes of the show. It's a legitimate undertaking. So for someone who once thought watching 4 seasons of Game of Thrones catching up during OTAs was a daunting task, this one laid in front of me is even more rigorous. So maybe I'll take the break and go Alice in Borderland instead.
Mike, tell everyone how they can listen to the Gojo Show.
Yeah, you can check us out wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, iHeart, all that good stuff. We also put the episodes up on YouTube under the DraftKings YouTube channel, the Gojo with Mike Golic Jr. playlist on that website. And at Gojo Show on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're all over the place. We're going to be pushing out a bunch of good stuff during Super Bowl week, taking everyone around Radio Row and, probably following around my dad if Stu Gotts makes an appearance there. We'll just put the camera on him the entire time and watch him wag his sausage fingers at everybody in Scottsdale.
Excellent job, Mike. Appreciate you stopping by here, man. Have fun next week.
Thanks for having me, man. Good to see you.